With the US Israeli attack underway on Iran, the conversation has enhanced or increased to the colonization or the decolonization of former British and Western colonies, including the current situation in Pakistan, where an elected former Prime Minister, Imran Khan, has been essentially kidnapped and imprisoned by the military dictatorship, a military regime that is beholden to the US imperial project in the Middle East, including in Gaza, and has signed on to US President Trump's Gaza Board of Peace. It is also a force that is pushing an imperial agenda, some would say, in Pakistan and throughout the Middle East. So, what is at stake? What is happening in these former colonies in the so called global south? Countries that aren't essentially part of the global north, where Western colonialism sprung from. To get an idea of all these terms, what do we mean by colonization, decolonization in this year, in this century, in the context of the US Israeli war on Iran? I'm joined by Sandew Hira. He is an author, an accomplished author, and he has written Decolonizing the Mind. Thank you so much for joining us, Sandhu. You're joining us from The Hague. It is supposed to be a symbol of Western jurisprudence, of Western justice. But in this day and age, with the ICC and the ICJ giving out verdicts or basically essentially trying to try people like Benjamin Netanyahu, what is the significance of the city that you're in? And in this moment when US and Israel are attacking Iran, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ali, for having me. I appreciate it. Yes, they call it, the city of international justice, but the Dutch government is supporting Israel, is supporting Trump. So there's nothing that justifies calling this city the city of international justice just because the International Criminal Court is here. Don't forget the International Criminal Court tried mostly people from the global south in Africa. They could have tried George Bush, they didn't, for an illegal war which killed almost a million Iraqis. They could now finally they have a verdict on Netanyahu, but there's nothing there that the Western governments follow up on the verdict by saying, "Look, we categorically denounce Netanyahu." None of that is the case. So yes, I'm in the city of The Hague, but it doesn't honor the name of City of Justice.
You have a long history with this concept of decolonization. I was born and raised in Pakistan. I worked in international media, in English language media, and this idea of the other, the primitive, the barbarian, where certain people, certain passports are afforded more rights, more space, as opposed to people from the so called global south. First of all, define these terms for us. What do we mean by the global south? What do we mean by colonization in this day and age? Because essentially, or at least on paper, colonization ended many years ago, in
Yeah,
places like India, in places
yeah.
like Pakistan. So, what do you mean by that in this context?
All right. So let's first define colonization. And colonization, modern colonization, is the economic, political, social, and cultural domination of Western powers that took over uh, uh, countries, occupied them in the rest of the world, meaning Africa, Asia, Latin America, etc. So, decolonization. So, if you see this aspect of colonization, then you can understand what decolonization is. Because decolonization was initially only articulated in political terms, meaning the independence of the former colonies from Western government, the political independence. But then you could change the prime minister and the president, etc. But you still have economic domination. That is what Kwame Nkrumah said. You need not only political independence, you need economic independence. So that is a struggle that is still going on because that economic independence was not so easy to be attained as political independence. And then you have the cultural independence because all the ideas that are being taught at universities and put into institutions, your economic system, your political system, etc., is derived from the European Enlightenment and the European philosophies. So that is where our mind still has been colonized to the full extent. And within the what I would call the global majority, because 10% of the global population lives in Western Europe, and the United States. You put up Australia, you might have maybe 20%. So 80% of the global majorities are non-whites, and so the global South comprises of that 80%. And within the global north, you have now sizable minorities of the global south in the global north. Now, if we want to understand where are we now in the phase of world history now, then you could say, let's say after 1945, we had a political independence thing. Now, with the decline of the West and the rise of China and India and all the others, you get the economic transformation, right? And we are still not up to the task of the decolonization of the mind, creating our own system of ideas of how to set up institutions in a country because we look to the West, parliamentary democracy, uh, and the political, social, economic systems we copy it from Western nations. But all these countries in the global South had civilizations: Islam, Hinduism, Chinese philosophy, African philosophy, indigenous philosophy. They already had also produced ideas about how to set up your society. What is a just society? What is a just system, social system, political system? The ideas have been floating around, but not taken seriously. Is discarded as invalid, inferior knowledge. Now, what you get now is that we are in this phase where we can say within the global south, within the global majority, there are people saying we need to decolonize the mind and look at our own knowledge that has been produced. And what is a best economic system? Take the most important thing, your economic system. We take the theory from Adam Smith and from economists from the West that tells us that capitalism is the best economic system, private enterprises, etc. Take Islamic economic theory. They say, while the liberals are saying economics is about the rational distribution of goods and services, Islamic economic theory tells you economics is about social justice. What is the best way to serve an economy to have served the people, the majority of the people? Those are different ideas. That's why you have Islamic banking with, different economic systems and so on. Now, these ideas for a long time were at the margin, but they are now coming back. And what you see is when you argued in the so-called global south, what kind of change do you want of your society? We went back to Western Enlightenment and say, oh, what is the opposition against injustice? That was socialism, was secular. You see, but even in Pakistan and Iqbal and all these other people, we had thinking about different way of justice and how to articulate justice, which could be religious, not necessarily secular. So what you see that apparently there's possibility to have anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, social reformist ideas not based on socialism, not based on Marxism, but based on other philosophies. In China, you get it back to Confucius. In Iran, they go back to Shiism and the 12 imams, and so what you see is you can have anti-imperialism that is not secular. That's different. And for many progressive people in the West, it's very confusing because they are accustomed to seeing social change only through the lens of socialism, of secularism. And that's why you have a lot of left wing people who say, I'm against the war against Iran, but I'm also against the Iranian system. So they can't respect that people in the global south have their own political philosophy and their own political system, which can be as good and maybe even better. Take, for
I,
example,
I,
this
I want you
question
to
of
answer
women.
that, but this is a fascinating conversation, and I want you to be specific on this because I think you're getting into something which is extremely important. And I think it has to do with confidence, it has to do with othering. I lived in Turkey for almost a decade, and this idea that secular was good and Islamic or Eastern was bad also had many different complexities in it. Turkey is one example. In Pakistan, for example, you have gatekeepers, brown gatekeepers, or the idea of the native collaborator, where anyone who doesn't subscribe to the idea of the West as the enlightened or the empire as enlightened is othered, is demonized, is ostracized, and is almost cancelled. So I want you to go into that idea, the complexities of using tropes, of using mischaracterizations to other people, and how that plays into this idea of empire today.
Well, let me give you an example. I go against on the economic system, right? So, in the Western economic theory, they were saying that the market is the best mechanism of providing efficient allocation of goods and services. And the driving force behind a market is something called profit maximization. So this is, and then you have graphs. If the demand goes up, then the price goes up, and all these things looks scientific. And then comes a Iraqi scholar, a Muslim scholar, who takes on Adam Smith, Marxism, etc., and he says what you call profit maximization, we call greed. So he's saying economics is about not objective science, it's about subjective feeling of what is the just economy. And the market economy can produce an unjust economy where a small group of people enrich themselves and a large group of people live in poverty. And that is what you have in Pakistan, you have it in India, you have it in all these other countries. So if you say, oh, but there's some validity in what Mohammed Bakir is saying about economics, is there maybe also a validity of what these Islamic scholars are saying about politics, about other ideas? Let me give you, for example, in the West, the question of women rights, right? So they promote this idea that Western liberalism is the best philosophy to promote women rights because it's individual. But Islam has also views on women rights. But the women rights are encaded within the protection of family. So it's not an individual, it's a social right. So what happens is that you can promote women's rights within a different narrative than individual liberalism. Namely, looking at men and women in a social context of family, of community, etc. If you do that, you get different policies. In Iran, what surprised me when I was in Iran, I gave lectures at the university there of Tehran. I think half of the professors are women there, you know. And I went to another in Mashhad University where they produce the drones, and it's a technological university. A lot of these people in technology are women. So if There are more women in technology in Iran than in the West. They have problems with getting women into mathematics and physics, etc. In Iran, they are the one they are producing the bombs. So what I'm saying with this, if there are different philosophies that can produce even better results in the terms that they protect both women and the social environment of the women, why don't we discuss it as a serious alternative to gender liberation according to liberalism? You see, we need to have those kind of discussions and value the ideas. And obviously, not all ideas might be good there, but that is why discussions are for, to acknowledge that there's validity in the thinking of global south.
But if you were to look at what the West is saying in terms of, oh, we want to liberate Iranian women from this regime, or if you go to, let's say, Afghanistan, where there's this idea of saving the women from the regime of the Taliban and liberating them and taking off their chadars and educating them to a Western standard of modernization theory, quote unquote. All of these ideas become tools in the hands of the empire, which at this stage is an aggressor. In places like Iran, in places like Pakistan, where you have this concept of feminism, which is considered, or Western feminism, which is considered superior to the local cultures.
Yeah, but obviously there are wide differences within the Islamic communities. Afghanistan is not Iran. Iran is not Pakistan. Pakistan is not Saudi Arabia, etc. So there are a variety of the, just like you have in the West, by the way. Trump is different from Macron, is different from the Spanish Prime Minister, but still the West. Uh, so what I think is that yes, the narrative of gender and sexuality are used to create this idea of the backward black and brown people who need to be saved by the whites, the white savior complex. And never think that they might have ideas that are different from yours and still valid, you know. And because of that, uh, they don't forget that the invasion of Afghanistan, promoted by Hillary Clinton, was to liberate Afghan women. And by liberating Afghan women, they meant killing 100,000 Afghans, among them a lot of women. So you liberate the women by killing them. What kind of logic is that? You know? And never accept the thing that maybe each country will have their own reform movement and their own way to change their society. You can't force it from others and say this is our values we are going to impose by war, and by war it's a bloody thing, killing people. So I think that what we see now is that the war in Iran wakens up a lot of people about, hey, are we in the phase of world history where we really, for the third time, going to defeat American imperialism, but with this consequence that with it, also the state of Israel might be gone in a few months. And that is the stage we are in. And when that comes around, the whole discussion about Islam and Islamophobia will come to the fore. Because if Iran wins, they will say, oh, now the barbarians, might take over Jerusalem and Israel and might not exist anymore. And you will get the beating of Islamophobia to the utmost in the Western media.
I grew up in the shadow of 9/11. I was in the U.S. studying when 9/11 happened, but I know this is part of a longer tradition, and I know what's happening in Iran is also almost cyclical in nature because the Iranian Revolution was preceded by almost 2 decades of tyranny under the Shah of Iran, where policies that were considered liberal policies, women's rights, and so on and so forth, were thrust upon a population with quite adverse consequences. And now, in this day and age, we see a parallel being drawn as well, where you have the enlightened Gulf Arab states with places like Dubai, the UAE being promoted as the ideal Western construct, as opposed to Iran on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, which is considered backward and the Stone Age, or sending it back to the Stone Age. There are these parallels that are being drawn. I want you to focus on that very quickly. And then I want you to talk about what's happening in Pakistan, where you have an elite and the military, which is beholden to this construct. May I call it the Zio construct of the West, increasingly so of the US with modernization theory. And then you have a population which is completely against, largely against, being beholden to foreign powers and this empire or the imperium, so to speak.
Okay, let me start with the first part, which is the modern Arab state. They are not modern at all. They are family dictatorships. That is not a modern political system. Saudi Arabia, the country is named after family. How many women in these Gulf states, etc., have the same education as the people of Iran, the women of Iran? Take another thing. Iran is the only country where transgender operations are legal. Yeah, you didn't know that, and many people, but one of the first countries in the world. I'm not talking in the West. They came with transgender operation long ago, later on. But Iran was very early under Khomeini already. They introduced a law that enables transgender operation. It has a particular history, by the way, but it is paid for by the state, and everything that comes with it, from the transport, the operation, etc., is paid for by the state. Where is that in the Gulf countries? How modern are these Gulf countries if you take these things into account? So the Gulf countries are not modern at all by any standards compared to Iran. Um, and let's say the thing like freedom of expression and discussion. When I was in Iran, I was in a metro in Tehran, and the metro had two type of compartments. One was for mixed men and women, and one was only for women. Now imagine here in the Netherlands or the United States, if women would say, I don't want to sit in a train with men. I want my own. It is impossible there. But in Iran, you can choose if you want to go to the mix or you want to go to women only compartment. Well, is that a higher form of liberation for women that you have the choice which you don't have in other countries? So that is Iran. Regarding Pakistan, I was very impressed by the rise of Imran Khan, because Imran Khan clearly was an anti-imperialist figure. What I saw from a lot of his pronouncements, etc., and obviously that was the reason from the outside where the West began to mobilize against Imran Khan and the movement that is there. But what I think, the process by putting him in jail, even if they kill him, I don't think by killing an individual you kill a movement that brought this individual to the fore, and that is what people try to forget. That you could kill leaders, you could imprison them, but you don't imprison their thoughts and their ideas. And I think one of the things of I think also in Pakistan, the elite might be affiliated to the West and follow the West, but the masses underneath, if you would ask them, who do you support, Israel or Iran? I don't have any polls, but I guarantee you that an overwhelming majority would support Iran, because like many other people, they are not stupid. They know very well what's going on. So this brings the question to the fore. The longer the war lasts, how stable will the government of Pakistan be? If the masses of Pakistan demand that they support the liberation of Palestine, you see? And that is happening everywhere, even in Islamophobic India of Modi. In India, the BJP has captured on Islamophobia to rise as a extreme right wing movement. You see, but now even when they see the United States getting down and treating India as a poodle, you can't buy this, you can't do this, and Modi is accepting it, you will get protests in India even from the base of BGP if it turns out that the alliance with Trump is negative for India. Look at the rising price of LNG and so. And people will think, would it not be better if America loses and makes India free from the so I think the longer this war takes, the more of these sentiments will come around, and that is basically a process of decolonizing the mind, where they don't accept the dominant narratives anymore. And now the dominant narrative obviously is promoted by the controlled media of these countries, but I guess underneath there will be social media and there will be other communication. So I'm not sure if the military government of Pakistan will last if the longer the war takes, because of the sentiments of the population that might come up. You see, for example, take the Pashtun tribes in Pakistan. They had a meeting with the Iranian consulate, and the Pashtun tribe of Pakistan said to the Iranians, "We are ready to defend you." And these are Sunnis, mind you, they're not Shias. The Pashtun are Sunnis. And they say, "You don't even have to pay for our weapons and our food. We'll take care of it. Just let us know when we should be there." If they are saying that to Iran, what are they discussing among themselves about Pakistan? What are they saying about the leaders of Pakistan? Wouldn't they say, why these guys don't support Iran? Why do they, And I think those discussions are going on in Pakistan, and I guess in a lot of parts of the Muslim world.
Beyond Shia and Sunni. There's so much to talk about and there's so much to delve into, and I hope that we can continue this conversation further. There's this idea of divisions that are created to sustain this hold of, or the colonial hold of the mind. But no doubt, what is happening in Iran and what we're seeing on social media, despite the various censorship and the controls that different Zionist organizations or pro Zionist organizations have. I think this is a seminal moment. Thank you again, Sandew Hira, author of Decolonizing the Mind. I hope that you will join us again. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section. Do like, subscribe, and share this content. I'll see you guys next time. Till then, take care.